Fire Emblem Fates turns 10 years old today, meaning I was just 14 when the game came out. Time sure does fly, doesn't it? This is an extremely important game to me. It's inspired me to create, it has a lot of characters that I absolutely love to death, it's helped me make new friends, and I wouldn't even have this YouTube channel if it weren't for the game. On the other hand, it's a game I find extremely frustrating, sometimes boring, and extremely poorly written. It's a complicated situation to be sure. So, why don't you join me for this retrospective as we go through 10 years of Fire Emblem Fates, its legacy, and what it means to me, and a lot of other people. And of course, please do like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy what you see. Thank you. I know that a lot of people started with 3 houses and might not be aware of the series' situation before then, so let me paint you a picture. The series was in dire straits. Fire Emblem 12 had sold a grand total of 2 copies and hadn't even come out in America, so many fans were wondering if the series even had a future at all. Then along came Awakening, which did in fact sell more than 2 copies, and was considered a grand success. It actually managed to popularize the series beyond the small bubble it was in previously, and all across the internet you would see comics or memes depicting humorous situations from the game. Of course, now that the series was proven to be capable of actually making money, many wondered what would come next. Enter January 14th, 2015, where a brand new Fire Emblem game was revealed, with more details shared in a direct in April. This was huge news. 3 games in one, a morally gray story where you got to choose what faction you sided with, characters having feet instead of peg legs. Truly, the possibilities were endless, folks, and Fire Emblem was in a better spot than it had ever been before. What could possibly go wrong? Please do note that I'll be talking about the pre-release era from an American perspective, as, believe it or not, I am not Japanese. If anyone from Japan is watching this, feel free to leave a comment about what the pre-release cycle was like on your end of things. Anyway, the build-up to the release was certainly something to say the least, and would foreshadow the controversies this game would be mired in. I remember one of the first things that people got mad at was that the face-petting minigame would be cut in the international release. This isn't really something I care about since it doesn't impact the technical gameplay, you know, that I actually play this series for, and I'm not really into the whole waifu thing. But regardless, some people were miffed that they would be paying the same price for a version of the game that technically had less content. This would lead to potentially one of the funniest things to ever happen in a video game ever, I think. You see, my friends, there was an 8-month gap between the Japanese and international release, so one group of very, very special individuals decided that they would attempt to make a fan translation before Nintendo of America could release their version. People make fun of the Binding Blade guy who says that he pulled a Thanos on Nintendo, ooh, but I think the audacity of this action is completely unparalleled. So, the story of Fates is already off to a great start. For some other fun pre-international release goodies, we of course have Corrin's inclusion in Smash, which led to much bemoaning, as it was obvious to many that this character was added just to push a game that wasn't even out everywhere yet. And because Fire Emblem already had more fighters than a bunch of other series that were generally more popular. I, however, thought they looked very cool, and playing as them in Smash got me more excited for the game than I already was. In fact, some of the oldest videos on this channel are Corrin clips that I thought were cool. There was also, of course, the price of the game itself. It was revealed that the other routes would cost $20, with the one you bought first costing the standard $40, for a grand total of $80. A lot of people thought that it was dumb that they wouldn't be getting the full game with their original purchase. However, before the game actually came out, many people assumed it was like a Pokemon situation where all of the Fates games would be mostly the same, leading people to believe Intelligent Systems was getting greedy after the immense success of Awakening, when today we know that all of the games are actually extremely different in how they play. There is also, of course, the content of the game itself. People who had access to the Japanese version of the game started spreading info about it online, and shared juicy tidbits, like how there's a support where the main character tries to make another character undergo conversion therapy. You better believe there's an article written about that one. Then of course, there is fun stuff like being able to marry your siblings. So while there still was a growing concern based on all the information I just stated, people were still very excited. I mean, come on, this is the game after the game that saved the series. Surely the issues are just over-exaggerated, and so we waited. I was very excited. I started the series with Awakening and had beaten it 3 times before Fates came out. Conquest was actually the first game I ever preloaded. I remember pressing A over and over and over again on my 3DS home screen, waiting for the lock to wear off. I don't think it came up before I had to go to bed though, so I did fall asleep, and by the time I woke up, Fire Emblem Fates would be accessible to the whole world. And so, here we are. After all that, the game is finally here, and I adored it. The gameplay, the music, the characters, and yes, even the story. Remember folks, this is when I was 14, before I became a snob and would go on to make 10+ minute videos about camera angles. Oh, how far I've fallen. But what did everyone else think? Well, let's just say it didn't live up to expectations. The morally gray story we were hyped up on was actually about as standard as you can get, with cartoonishly evil villains and contrived plot points that people weren't fans of. Our main protagonist Corrin got the worst of it, as everyone sucking up to them in the story, despite their sometimes very silly decisions, led to people disliking them in the real world as much as the characters in the game liked them. There are also just straight up some weird localization changes, like Baruka and Saizo's support being completely changed because some translator thought it would be funny if the two silent characters just did this. And of course, how could we forget the Deep Realms, where once your characters get married, they would send their baby off to another dimension to grow up instantly. Not really something you want in a game, where you want to take the lore and world building seriously, you know? The game just wasn't what people thought it would be. I'm not going to go over every excruciating detail about what made people not fond of it. All you need to know is that there are several almost decade-old videos with hundreds of thousands of views that criticize and attempt to fix the writing. One of the most upvoted posts on the Fire Emblem Reddit is a joke theory that the entire game is a fan fiction written by a character from the previous game, and, of course, that Revelation is widely considered to be the worst Fire Emblem game of all time, which is a crazy thing to say when Radiant Dawn exists. Video on that eventually. So that's it then, right? The story sucks, the characters suck, the localization sucks, and 2/3 of the routes have garbage gameplay. The game launched and it sucked and it bombed and everyone hated it, right? Well, no, not really. The game actually reviewed very well and sold millions of copies. It was very similar to Awakening, where you would find humorous animations with insanely high view counts, and comics and such about the game all over the internet, although maybe not to the same degree as Awakening. However, even today, 10 years later, the game receives constant fan art. I mean, just look at this cute little adorable animation of Charlotte throwing Benny. This is the truest form of art. Even beyond your typical fan works, there's currently an ongoing series on YouTube where each individual unit in Revelation gets an hour-long review that consistently garners at least 10,000 views, and sometimes much more. So even the game deemed as the worst in the entire series has enough interest as to where at least 26,000 people want to know how badly Rinka sucks. So despite the game's reception among the community, there have been some absolutely stellar creative works made for the game within these past 10 years. So I'm going to shout out a few of my favorites. I think if any of you haven't played Fates in a while and want to give it another spin to celebrate the anniversary, I would highly recommend checking out the Gay Fates mod. The earliest release I can find came out just 5 days after the game came out in America, which is seriously impressive, and it was most recently updated 2 months ago, showing the long-term passion of those who work on the project. It adds a ton of new supports made by various talented writers, and adds a new layer to your strategy as you can do a lot of pairings that weren't previously possible. For example, I had Camilla marry Caden in a recent Revelation run I did that led to a pretty interesting Selkie build. It also adds a ton of unique supports for mother and child interactions if that was one of your critiques of the original. It's a very fun mod to try if you're stepping back into Fates and want a fresh experience from a game that's still mostly the same gameplay-wise. If you're looking for something a little more out there though, I highly recommend Garon Quest, a mod from 3 years ago. In this mod, our glorious King Garon replaces Corrin as the main character. The remixed chapters from the base game are very fun, and playing as an army of enemies adds a fresh spin on things. It's also very funnily written, and while it makes fun of a lot of aspects of Fates, you can tell it was made by somebody who loves it all the same. It also contains the saddest death in all of Fire Emblem.
Faceless, no!
If you want something completely different, however, there's always the hack that completely reimagines Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon in the Fates engine, which was fully completed 2 years ago. It adds a lot of cool and unique gameplay mechanics that weren't even in either games, and it's a fun thing to experience if you're a fan of either of the games. On the other hand, if this video is getting you back into the mood to try Fates, but you don't want any of these fancy schmancy mods that make actual additions, I recommend the HD Texture Pack, which was uploaded 2 years ago. It makes the game look better than it ever could on the 3DS. So those are a few of the fan projects that have been made over the game's decade-long run that I think are worth your time. Those are just a few of the ones I'd recommend though. You could spend hours coming over every awesome little thing the community has made. There is a decade worth of stuff after all, and I deeply appreciate every ounce of effort that this game's fans have put into showing their own appreciation for it over time. What gives then? The game blows, and yet there's been consistent, high-effort fan works and dedication to it for a decade? You would be hard-pressed to find similar support for other games people have deemed to be an affront to God. Well, I think the thing of it is that a lot of online discussion is inherently echo-chambery and leads a bit on the side of negativity. For example, in high school, a few months after the game came out, I talked to a girl who was playing Birthright. She was playing on Phoenix mode because she was afraid of the permadeath mechanic and just wanted to ship the characters, and she had fun doing so. That's it. This is an interaction you can expect to have with a normal person if you ask them about video games they like. I've had similar interactions with a bunch of other people too, because Fates is a popular game that sold well on an extremely popular console. Meanwhile, if you go to the comment section of, I don't know, a mecha video where it's stated in the thumbnail that Revelation is the worst Fire Emblem game, you're more inclined to encounter people that already agree with his perspective on the series, as they're probably already subscribed to him. This of course also applies to my own YouTube channel, where a lot of my subscribers probably thought that Mathis Moment was the funniest thing in the world back in 2020. Now that's not to say that Fates is secretly a masterfully written masterpiece, mind you, just that it might not be as bad as you think if you're constantly interacting with communities that echo that it's the worst thing ever. For my very own example, before this year, I hadn't even played Revelation since it had first came out. Back before, as I said, my tastes had really developed. However, I did have 10 years worth of interacting with Fire Emblem fans online, which naturally led me to believe it was a terrible game that wasn't worth my time. Eventually though, Danny Doyle and Meister Schwart convinced me to give it another go, and I actually had quite a bit of fun. Not the most fun I've ever had with the series, and the story still wasn't good, but a lot of the maps were better than I had given them credit for. Sure, they were still boring gimmicky maps, but nothing worse than Cog of Destiny, a map from a game that people actually like. Even on the writing front, I think there's something to enjoy here if you're willing to meet the game on its level. Sure, if you're going into it expecting a morally gray subversive masterpiece, then you're gonna be disappointed. But the comedic aspect of all three of the Fates games is just beautiful. It's corny, over-the-top fun where you can watch the most evil man ever exist struggle to figure out who his daughter is just because she's wearing purple. The stories of the Fates games rule if you're going into them looking for a laugh. We love Garon posting on this channel. It's dumb, it's stupid, but it's fun. I really can't bring myself to hate these guys. Even then, the actual playable characters aren't as one-note as people would have you believe, with Charlotte of course being one of my personal favorites for forever now. I was even able to make a video looking at the subtleties of the character that people consider to be the worst. So if you haven't played these games in 10 years, or if you haven't played them at all, I'd encourage you to give them a chance. Maybe you'll find something you appreciate now that you didn't see before. But that's enough about the history and perception and whatever else about Fire Emblem Fates. You get the picture by now. At the end of the day, it's a work of art, and it's up to the individual to decide what it means to them. So, what does Fire Emblem Fates mean to me? I know that it's common on YouTube to exaggerate your true feelings about something to make a video more entertaining, and I do that too sometimes. Let's be real here. My Astream video, there were a few exaggerations in that. But I would like to clarify that the next section comes from the heart. To me, Fire Emblem Fates is a game that takes me back to a simpler time, from before I had to pay taxes. True bliss. I have a lot of specific memories about the game from back then. I remember that the DLC that added a new defense map and Ike's class seal had just come out, but I didn't have the money to get it. Luckily, around the same time, my neighbor needed somebody to babysit her cats, and she paid me up front. After feeding them on the first day, I remember running back to my house and excitedly trying to figure out how to beat the map. I remember being at my high school Smash Club and being super excited as I was finally able to beat Conquest on hard mode for the first time, with the Lodestar parry being the one to deal the final blow. Sharing my achievement with my Donald Shill friend who was also there at the time, a friend I haven't talked to for many years now. A lot of small things like that. Little happy memories from a time in my life where, to be frank, I was outright miserable most of the time. Even just listening to Road Taken fills me with a warm feeling that I don't quite know how to describe. There's a certain calmness to it, a feeling that makes me a little teary-eyed. I'm even listening to it now as I write this part of the script. There may be Fire Emblem games that I like more, or that I just think are objectively better, but there will probably never, ever be another Fire Emblem game, or just game in general, that makes me feel the way Fire Emblem Fates does. You could say that I'm blinded by the nostalgia I have for the game, and that if circumstances had been different, I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much, if at all. That may be true, but even recently, this game is still opening a lot of doors in my life. 2 years ago, I made a video trying to optimize Perry's personal skill, and somebody who also enjoys her skill, Blind Coco, enjoyed the video and messaged me about it. For years now, we've been consistently talking to each other, sharing ideas for our creative projects, and, most importantly, I've had the honor of spoiling Invincible for him. Then there's Farron, somebody who's filled me with a lot of insight about the game, who only felt the need to interact with me because of this goofy Yaga voice I did for my Garen Quest streams. Oh boy, they thought that was a good one. Of course, there's also Legspike, who I've actually met in person, and was the main person I hung out with at Frosty Faustings this year, and we only met because of our mutual interest in Fates. I could go on, but you get the point. Fates has allowed me to interact with many wonderful people through my YouTube channel. Even beyond just that, the game has inspired me massively. For years now I've been working on my own strategy RPG, and I probably wouldn't even be making a project like that if Fates hadn't enthralled me so much so many years ago. Fates is a game that continuously inspires me to create. Even the parry video I mentioned earlier is a part of a set of 3 small videos I made going over unit builds that I just thought were neat and wanted to show off. And for the last bit of this section, I wanted to share a specific memory from the process of making that video. I was at my aunt's cottage, watching Pirates of the Caribbean late at night, and playing through the chapter where you have to free the Hoshidian nobles, seeing how Soul Maid Charlotte would do against the sages on the top right part of the map, getting ready to take a break as my cousin was preparing a bonfire. However, we would soon receive a call from my dad saying that my grandmother had unexpectedly passed away. I was shocked, regrets about not having a final chance to visit her and things like that swirled around in my head, and I didn't want to participate in the bonfire anymore. I just wanted to be alone. I had completely shut down, except for one thing. For that night, I got lost in the world of Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, the characters that I had grown to love, the music that soothed me, and my task to share my interest in these specific builds kept me focused during a night that otherwise I would have spent wallowing in sadness. What does Fire Emblem Fates mean to me? I tried to write out a specific sentence here to give an exact definition of what this game means to me, but I can't. It's not something I can quantify with words alone. However, I hope that through this last section you were able to understand the truest form of my feelings. Fire Emblem Fates is a game with many, many flaws, a game that I actively hate 1/3 of, but it's a game I've loved for 10 years now, and it's one I'll probably continue to adore for the rest of my life. That's enough about me, though. Now, I want to share something about the community. A lot of the game's characters are written off as bleh or one note or whatever, but I know that if the worst character can mean something to me, then all of the other characters can mean something to somebody else too. So, last year, when the game's online service was shutting down, I started a project. In Fire Emblem Fates, you can recruit another person's unit from their castle. So, I wanted to collect every unit in the game from somebody who considered the character to be one of their favorites, and leave a comment explaining why. I haven't commented on the project since it concluded, but that's because I was saving it for this video. This is my tribute to Fire Emblem Fates. Thank you, everyone. And here's to 10 more years.
Beyond the shore, just out of reach, yet the waters ever change, flowing like time. The path is yours to climb. In the white light, a hand reaches through, a double-edged blade cuts your heart in two. Waking dreams fade away, embrace the brand new day. Sing with me a song of birthrights and love. The light scatters to the sky above. Dawn breaks through the gloom, white as a bow, lost in thoughts, all alone. Beyond the shore, just out of reach, yet the waters ever change, flowing like time. The path is yours to climb. Embrace the dark, you call a home. Gaze upon an empty white throne, a legacy of lies a familiar disguise.